Hey guys, I told you that I had a bad alternator and I had to have my car fixed, right?
I don't know if you did.
I don't think so.
Did I tell you that?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, my car broke down outside of Domino's last week
Okay.
Yeah.
and it wouldn't start. It was the alternator, right? The battery was dead. It wouldn't start. So I just called in a pizza for delivery to my house and the driver gave me a lift home.
That's nice. Hopefully you left a tip.
I think that's
Of
a joke,
course.
but knowing you, that could be true.
All right, here we go. We'll talk about Russia. They got theirs, but that's our clickbait. So we'll start with something a little more boring, but not just boring. There's a story here. Yes, GitLab had a critical patch. But that's not the real story. What is it, Patrick?
So the real story here is that we're seeing more and more and more attacks against things that put the hackers in control of the software that your vendors provide. And so if I'm a hacker and I want to get you or anyone else or just random people because I'm going to spread ransomware and make money, I want to get code on as many systems as possible through the path of least resistance. And we talked about SBOM, software bill of materials. And the industry is very immature right now. We're still trying to figure that out. A lot of people do not know what things are running in their environment. So we're going to talk about, PHP and Cisco bugs and things like that need to be patched. A lot of people are like, we don't know if we have those because they don't have an SBOM. Well, it goes further than that. Do you know which of your vendors are using GitLab?
Yeah, who knows?
And whether or not they could fit something, a hacker could slide something in and get compiled and then get you to download and run it as an update to their product. This is what This is what happened with SolarWinds. But so imagine now that GitLab is the delivery mechanism. So SolarWinds doesn't have to make the mistake. Their vendor GitLab can have the vulnerability.
So GitLab is like the Domino's pizza of vulnerabilities.
In this case, I think that might work. But now we're talking about supply chain attacks against your supply chain.
Yeah.
So it's too removed. So you start thinking about, well, do I have to worry about what kind of products my supply chain is using to know whether they're at fault. Because, for example, if I knew I had a critical component that was, using GitLabs, I might not update it until I'm sure that they're, running the right version and clear.
So short of a law that requires everybody to disclose their SBOMs, which would sort of mitigate the problem unless you didn't look at them.
Make it a part of the
what
contract.
can we do about that?
Zero trust is probably our best defense. Hiring Pulsar Security wouldn't hurt. But no.
Wow, shameless plug.
Hey, you gotta have one every 100 shows.
Actually.
Every 100 shows, you need one.
Shameful, full of shame. Full of
I'm not
shame.
ashamed. I have no shame. So, I think zero trust is really the best way to protect against this, because zero trust is basically assume breach. You assume that bad things are going to get in the environment and you just minimize what they can do so they can only do what they're supposed to do. And you don't give them access to databases and file shares and things like that.
That's just good architecture as far as I'm concerned.
It is, but it's not the way most
It's hard to do.
I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but most networks are not zero trust. Remember we went through that single sign-on fervor?
I do, yeah.
To make things easier? Well, that undermines zero trust. Zero trust, the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I had this conversation with a customer recently. They want to do a single sign-on, and I said, well, that's very convenient, but it also raises security issues. And, they said, really? How? And it's just the whole idea is that, well, when you sign on once, now you're relying on what? Cookies? Or tokens or whatever
Well, you're relying on trust between components. So if one component is breached, the other one will trust it. And now you open the whole thing. It's like keeping your diamonds, your emeralds, and your rubies in the same vault.
Right. Who would do that?
Scrooge McDuck would never do that.
Where do you keep your rubies, Patrick?
I keep them in the store unbought.
Keeps them in his underwear. That's what I think.
They'll hold
Come
on
and
to him
get
till you
him.
need them. Yeah.
Come and get the family jewels.
But we keep valuable things separate from each other often.
Yeah.
People don't.
Yeah.
You might have family documents in one, fireproof chest somewhere, and you might have, ammunition somewhere else, and the food supply.
And I think
I'm going a little.
I think he's giving something away right now, Dwayne.
I know, right?
So if you see
He's
a
giving
safe,
details.
if you
And then
break
he's
into
like that
Patrick's
hollow
house,
book.
If you break into my house, you're not getting out.
yeah. But if
the
somebody
getting in's
does
easy.
get the family jewels, they're not going to find the ammunition in that same place. You just told
No.
us. So
No.
Well, you're going to find the ammunition everywhere. That's the thing.
You'll be able to
Now
catch it out of the
you keep
air.
that you keep in your underwear. That's what we're saying.
I find the best
Take
place
that.
to keep it is in the gun.
Take that.
No. Let's preach safe gunning.
Oh,
Keep
yeah.
the gun
Safe
and
gunning.
the ammo separate under lock and key.
Right. Locked up.
Right.
Anyway,
Yes.
so we
What the hell
that
are we
was-
talking about anyway?
That was
I'm
our
sorry.
biggest divergence in a while. So we're talking
It
about
was.
the fact
Oh,
that
wow.
the GitLab vulnerability, what the vulnerability is, we might as well talk about that real quick. The GitLab
Yeah.
vulnerability was the ability for attackers to run pipelines as other users. So imagine, and maybe I'm taking this out of context, I hope not, but imagine if you had a product and you were using GitLab and we understood the significance of your pipelines and we could run a pipeline for your product such that it compiles with like an extra startup parameter or some, a ransomware payload so that we could poison your next build so that so users download a new firmware and they download our code as well. And now we've poisoned your well. Now, I probably well oversimplified this, but
yeah.
it's still a concern and a vulnerability, and it's so much further up the chain.
Think of it as cross contamination in the kitchen, right? If you're cutting chicken on a cutting board and then you use that same knife and cutting board to cut tomatoes, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, E. coli. Yeah, in this case,
Or salmonella.
E-hacker.
E-hacker.
So that's that story. And again, we keep bringing this up. We try to talk about different things, but these are the biggest concerns. One is organizations should be moving towards zero trust. Organizations should be looking at what their SBOMs are, what their software and hardware inventories are. They should be interrogating and really kind of torturing their vendors about what are their practices. Do they have SBOM? Do they have these practices?
Yeah.
And it's really, and one of the things they said in this article that I really believe in is it says, and companies are getting shorter and shorter durations to patch
Yeah.
than
Right.
because of this.
Yep.
Yeah, Patrick, when you say we should be moving towards zero trust, that's a kind of is that definition open for debate, or is there a known list of things that you should do if you want to be zero trust?
I'll say something, and then I think Dwayne wants to say something. It's a well-defined framework that describes how your system should interact, and it
With
is
other
far more
systems.
restrictive than what most people have today.
Okay.
Yes, 100%. But it's like if you're looking at zero trust and you just literally look at the term zero trust, anywhere you see a system or a component trusting something else, you should evaluate it, right? Does it need? Do we need this trust chain, right?
All right.
And we do the same thing when we attack networks. We're looking for, if I were to breach this particular certificate server, right? What are all of the things I can do by owning that server? And then the conversation goes to the customer, let's get rid of that server, right? If you don't need a certificate server, it shouldn't be there.
All right.
So, it comes down to how do we eliminate those single points of trust so you don't have the ability to move around the network easily.
And I might say this wrong because I don't claim to be an expert in zero trust. I know a lot about it, but it's a fairly in-depth topic.
Patrick doesn't trust anybody.
Yeah, that's easy for him. Yeah.
I think you are an expert.
Let's say we have a CRM like Salesforce. That is a good system. It's a single system that has its own separate credentials. It's hosted. It's actually a pretty good element for a zero trust environment. But then I integrate it into my inventory system that's on premise that has access to my databases. And I integrate it into my project management system, which has integration into my payroll system and into my accounts payable system. Those integration points mean that if I can get into maybe an API through the CRM, I can get back to those databases on-prem. I can get to, and so it's convenience. Again, we're having to cut convenience.
So it's sort of the opposite of single sign-on. It's anytime that you're traversing from one application to another, you have to relog in, kind of thing.
And the integrations have to be really well thought out to make sure that it's not a cascade failure across things. A lot of times, Zero Trust allows data to move under certain principles, but not permissions to move.
Okay. I added a link in the show notes to a Microsoft Learn document, What is Zero Trust? So that should help people if they want to go look at that.
Okay. We should move on.
Yeah, well, let's move on. PHP, which is a popular programming language. People probably know that. A bug in PHP executes RCEs, which is remote code execution, crypto miners, and DDoS attacks. Distributed denial of service.
I was waiting for this one. I'm actually surprised it's taken this long.
It's been a long time since I've thought of a language as being insecure. This is kind of weird.
Because it's affecting people using the extended character set for Chinese and Japanese, and it's manipulating the conversion to ASCII.
Wow.
Yes. In order to escape the command line. And it uses techniques. They talk about in the article techniques that I know Dwayne uses every day, like doing webgets, wgets, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's all sorts of really neat ways to inject into web servers. Because lots of people think of like, hey, listen, if I'm going to inject special characters into a web server, right? I'm going to go to the URL. I'm going to type www.iwannahack.you.com or whatever it is, and then I'm going to do / and I'm going to put a bunch of weird characters up there that might get translated. Like %C0%AF, right? That translates.
We were a bunch of weird characters.
I know, right? We are. I'm going to put
You're
Patrick, Carl,
describing
Dwayne,
security
right?
this week.
So let's see. Patrick, Carl, and Dwayne. That's the bunch of weird
At the
characters.
top of every website. It'll work on some of them, trust me. So you encode these characters and put them in the URL. And sometimes the server doesn't know how to deal with it, right? So %C0%AF gives you the ability to do what's classically called the directory traversal, where you can encode the ... and /, right? Yeah. And just get the ASCII values for those or the Unicode values for those and put them in the URL bar. So most people will think of encoding that way. But what they won't think of in encoding is like, well, what if you were, for those of you who haven't done this is actually a lot of fun. Download Burp Suite. There's a community edition. It's free. Open up the proxy, click browser, and just browse the web. And you'll see all of your requests going out to the internet, right? So you'll browse one website, and you'll probably see 300 requests go out. Some of them will go to Google Analytics. Some of them will go all over the place. Ads are pulled from different places. And then you can look at all the data that's being sent. And if you take a look at things like the browser compatibility, right? You can start to see, it says I'm compatible with AppleKit, Mozilla, and all these other things that get sent, right? You can see things like what's your... is this an X forward for, am I coming through a proxy server, right? That's legitimately saying, hey, I'm forwarding this for an internal IP address.
All those HTTP headers that nobody understands.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dwayne does.
So those are fantastic places to put encoded data, because what happens if on the back end we're logging that information? What happens if Carl... Yeah, a customer comes to you and says, hey, I want to know what the percentage of Chrome versus Edge browsers are coming in. Carl might take that data, jam it into a database, and then be able to come up with a statistic. Well, the problem there is, what if, as my browser version, instead of saying Edge or Chrome, I say tick or 1 = 1, right? Now that browser version gets injected as SQL. Or I bypass that with custom characters. So coming back to this article... They're saying if you have Chinese and or Japanese locale characters installed on the computer and you're running XAMPP for Windows, then at that point you can inject ASCII characters that the computer now understands, like a dot slash is entirely different in, the Japanese character set as opposed to the, ANSI normal character set. So, it's definitely an interesting way for it to do a bypass. And we see these things all the time. We're always looking for ways. Patrick talks about these as well with the, Cyrillic O's versus, a normal O in a URL. Yeah, so exactly.
This is really the programming language equivalent of a SQL injection attack, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
a bypass. Yeah, because an injection attack is a bypass as well, where I'm bypassing what you're trying to do in a SQL server and get data back. In this particular case, I can inject, different types of ASCII characters that the computer understands and bypass the normal security. That would say, hey, you can't run an executable here.
So this reminds me of those movies where they have a translator who's faking it, and the person says, this long diatribe, and the translator says, yes.
Yeah.
You don't know because it's a translation layer.
Wait a
Who are you to
second.
say whether that was...
Yeah. The person could be on a tear and insulting the audience, and the translator would say, have a nice day.
I can't remember what movie it was. There was some kind of like drug deal, weapons trade, and the guy was faking Albanian.
I know which one you're talking about.
And I forget, was it Barry?
Wait a minute, that happened to me in real life.
It wasn't volunteers.
You did an Albanian drug deal?
No, it was Bulgaria. But
oh, wow.
I asked Martin Kulov, right?
Yes.
By name.
You know Martin Kulov? Yeah. So Martin Kulov in Bulgaria, I'm speaking at a Bulgarian conference over there many years ago. I asked him for the Bulgarian to, good morning, welcome to my presentation. So he gave me and I wrote it down, and I get up, and apparently I said, good morning, I have 3 balls.
So did you get a laugh? At least.
True either way.
Yeah, especially because I set it up as, Martin Kulov gave me some Bulgarian to welcome you to my presentation. So here goes. Tell me how I did. And then, of course, hilarity ensued.
Was that his intent?
Okay,
or
maybe
you just
I wrote the joke,
mispronounced it?
but it was fun. Oh, no. It was the Bulgarian for I have 3 testicles.
Oh, so he just messed with
awesome.
you.
He was just messing
Actually,
with you.
it was just a joke. I wrote it.
Okay.
Martin
Yeah,
didn't
right.
do
That is legit.
Set him up.
That's
Set him
legit.
up.
I actually did ask him, how do you say I have 3 balls in Bulgarian? But he gave me that. Imam 3 testis. All right. So here's the thing about this PHP bug. If I'm a PHP programmer, I have code that I'm maintaining that's in PHP. What do I do?
Patch.
Don't sell us the Chinese.
It's not something you're doing in your code. It has to do with the way that the arguments are passed into CGI. That's processed for.
Is there a new version of PHP that I should upgrade to?
Yep, absolutely. The upgrades for that would be, what am I seeing here? Reasonable disclosure has been made in PHP versions 8.38, 8.220, and 8.129. So yeah, you need to go patch.
All right, good. Let's move on because wow, it's been like 20 minutes already.
Well, this is a quick one.
I know. Good Lord.
Our friend, I hope friend of the show, Mark Russinovich, Microsoft Azure CTO, last time I checked, helped write a paper with Ahmed Salem from Microsoft as well, where they've come up with a way to fingerprint their LLMs, their large language models, so that when someone rips off Phi 3 or whatever version of ChatGPT they've encapsulated and says, oh, this is our new LLM, and they add a few bells and whistles, Microsoft can go and test it and make sure they didn't rip theirs off. And so this is something that will probably be used by a lot of people.
Yeah, and I brought this one up because Mark Russinovich is one of those brainiacs who he wrote all the sysinternals tools and then went to work
He's a really
at
nice
Microsoft.
guy too.
Super nice guy, super smart. And if you ever see him speak, you can just go up to him afterwards and just, have a good conversation.
I definitely recommend seeing him speak if you get the chance.
But they're obviously thinking about security and thinking about safe AI, right? Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is about making sure they protect their intellectual property, but I could also see it where if someone represented that they were using an AI written by a reputable company, that you could use this fingerprinting to test it.
Yep.
Now, I would say if
Very
this were
good.
me, And I'm thinking that I'm always thinking of the dark side of this.
Wait, should we play the music, Dwayne? Should we play the music?
We should.
All right, play the music.
It's criminal career advice.
So if this is me, the first thing you do when breaking into a system is reconnaissance. You need to know what type of exploits may work. Now, there is an OWASP top 10 for LLMs right now, which include everything from prompt injections to excessive agency to whatever. There's all sorts of very well-known attacks against LLMs right now. But for each LLM, it's a little bit different. So let's say I wanted to then recon a CRM that's using an AI LLM in the back end. I don't know which one they're using. I might be able to actually use these fingerprinting questions with the hash algorithms defined to then try and determine, am I looking at ChatGPT or am I looking at Ollama or am I looking at something else? And then from there, only exploit the attacks that can break into that particular LLM.
Because when you're hitting a website or any software, you want to know the version to know what it's vulnerable to, what it's not.
Yeah, and this is a great way now for me to figure out.
Thanks, Mark.
If I can do this type of hashing. So that's what we need. We need an LLM scanning tool.
See what you did?
That will give me what I'm most
should never
likely
have told
dealing
Dwayne about this.
The nuclear atomic energy can be used for great good and great evil, as is everything else.
Yeah.
I tend to look at the evil side and want to see it all burn, but that's just me.
All right, let's move on to the last story before the break. Cisco SSM, you'll tell me what that means. On-prem bug lets hackers change any user's password. Oh my God. First of all, what's SSM?
It's the Smart Software Manager.
Yeah, so Smart Software Manager on-prem. And this allows Cisco to, does what it says. It allows them to manage on-prem accounts and devices and that sort of stuff. So if we take a look at the flaw here, this particular flaw, I'm trying to see if there's a patch or not. Yes, there is. Okay. So there is a patch right now. If you're on 8.202206 or earlier, the first release that had fixed this particular issue is 8-202212. If you're on Cisco SSM on-prem version 9, you're fine. There's no issues here.
Okay.
So this is one of those things where you'll see this article. If you are running Cisco SSM on-prem, you'll see, oh my God, anybody can get any password changed. But if you're on the latest version, you're fine. Okay. So not too much to worry about there. But the interesting part of this one is, reading this is on Bleeping Computer. We'll post this article. The vulnerability is due to improper implementation of the password change process. An attacker can exploit this vulnerability by sending a crafted HTTP request to the affected device. A successful exploit allows an attacker to access the web UI or API with the privileges of the compromised user.
Okay, so
and this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this one. Is it's interesting. A lot of people do a lot of really great things to protect the front end, but then they assume that they're never going to get a malicious request to the back end API, or they're never going to get a malicious post request. So Carl can explain the differences between gets and posts in web servers, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Get is when you go to your browser and you type in securitysthisweek.com. The browser does an HTTP get. It basically passes any parameters in the URL itself and then gets back whatever HTML and HTTP around it. A post is a little bit different. That basically takes usually form data, when you're filling out a form, but it could be a file upload. It could be a big chunk of data. It could be a big chunk of anything. And that doesn't use a URL to encode all the data, but instead in the HTTP body, there is this data, right? Yeah. But you know what I think of when you say the password change process, what I think of is, if you've ever done this, you've forgot your password, or you click the forgot password link, or you want to change your password, what usually happens is the web server will send you by email some link that has some magic token in it that's encoded, and it will only be active for 10 minutes or so. And so if you click on that within 10 minutes, you go somewhere and the web server says, this must be this person because this is the token we sent them. And then you can change your password. But that's like a web server. But the stuff that you're talking about, this is a Cisco device that's probably not behind the firewall, obviously, because people can send requests to it, but that it's accepting requests from anyone. Now,
anyone who can access this system, right? Yeah. And
when we have APIs behind the, not behind the firewall, but when we have API servers, they require authentication and authorization.
Surprisingly, a lot of APIs don't look for authorization. We find it all the time. We were just recently doing a pen test where we call anything we want to. Actually, interestingly enough, we're going to come back to this conversation in the Life 360 article we're going to talk about here shortly.
Okay.
But what's interesting here is another way to exploit this Carl. Take something like an IDOR, which is indirect object reference.
Okay.
Let's say you're logged into a particular website and you have your email address in there and your username and your password and all that good stuff. I register for a new account. So I'm a different person. I'm hacker@hackers.com, right?
He's a new guy now.
I know. And when I go into my profile, I click update my email address and I change it to garbage and I click submit. I catch that request. And if I can change, what if it says like, username equals, hacker, email address used to equal hacker@hacker.com, and the new one is garbage, right?
So you're a man in the middle attack.
And then I change that username is hacker to username equals Carl. And then I click send, just allow it to go. The backend system, if it's not verifying my authentication token with the profile I'm trying to update, it will then allow me to update your email address to my whatever I had typed. Then I just go and say, I want to reset my password.
I'm just so used to using well-architected solutions with proper security that thought never even crossed my mind that you would have this device that just will accept anything. It's unbelievable.
That's
to
the
me.
cracks. That's what we exploit.
Oh, yeah.
Is the things that people never intended. I never intended it to do that.
I'd say more often than not. There's a site we were talking to a customer. I can't mention names or anything, but back-end API is all GraphQL, right? So front end, beautiful UI, able to log in and do all sorts of wonderful things. We then say, okay, what's happening on the background? Every time I make a request, I see the web page calling this GraphQL backend. So we just started making queries to the back end and saying, hey, can you give us a list of all of the users? And sure enough, boom, it gave us a list of all the users. We said, okay, can you give us a list of all of the password hashes for all these users? It was like, boom, here's all the users and the password hashes.
Lord.
And you could do that unauthenticated, right? Because they're
It's unheard of, especially a company like Cisco. You would think they'd be on top of things like this.
It's tough. A lot of it, like, how old is Cisco?
Yeah, they've been around since the beginning of the internet, right?
I don't know, 30 years at least, 40 years? Right. So you
In
take
the
a look
90s.
at the companies like Cisco, Oracle, even Microsoft. Some of that code is as old as the three of us on this call. Well, maybe not that old, actually. At least half of our age. So, you find some small piece of code that was borrowed from an older project, and sure enough, there's an exploit there.
I mean, we've seen recently, I think in our last episode, we talked about a regression.
Yeah.
Where somebody restored some code and ended up bringing back a bug.
Yeah.
Reuse of libraries, reuse of techniques. It's one of the ways developers get things done so quickly, and they can reintroduce problems.
All right. And with that happy news, let's take a quick break for these very important messages, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to Security This Week. I'm Carl Franklin with Patrick Hines and Dwayne LaFlotte. A few interesting things to ponder here, but before we continue, I want to tell you that if you don't like these ads, and who does really, you can get an ad-free feed by becoming a patron at patreon.com securitythisweek.com, and $5 a month, and you can get rid of all those pesky ads. Okay, this one's from Bleeping Computer. Notorious Fin7 hackers sell EDR killer to other threat actors. We got to define Fin7 and EDR.
So
what's going on
Fin7
here?
is an APT. They're a
Another acronym. Great.
I know,
advanced
right?
persistent threat. They're a group.
Yeah.
And some of them were they have a history. It gets blurry. There's guesswork that goes into that. These guys are these guys and those guys are those guys. But it's perceived that they're a Russian hacking syndicate, basically bad guys, and they're selling a tool that will kill AV and other endpoint protection systems. So in the simplest version, imagine hackers develop a way to stymie and DDoS the AV on a target system so that you can infect it. And they claim that they can do this to many.
The AV. What's the AV on a target system? AV.
Yeah.
AV or other endpoint protection. AV is a form of endpoint protection.
Like antivirus product.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm thinking of like the Azure API service that basically is a front end between your customers and your APIs, and it can do things like throttle and protection. Is that kind of thing we're talking about?
No. This is more like Windows Defender. Windows Defender is an antivirus / EDR, right? And EDR is an endpoint detection and response tool. It's something that will see a virus trying to run and will kill the process.
Okay.
Or malware or whatever, ransomware, that sort of stuff.
And antivirus is the oldest form of that,
right? But
there are others that will, look at network traces, not just signatures for files.
Yeah, Sentinel-1.
Okay, so
yeah, exactly.
So when you use the word endpoints, that's what came to mind. API endpoints.
Endpoint is any system.
Any system that's vulnerable.
Yeah, any computer system. Yeah. Yep.
I got it.
Yeah, so you can, and there's tons of them out there. There's CrowdStrike, there's Defender, there's, like I said, there's Sentinel-1. So there's all sorts of different endpoint detection and response pieces of software that are literally designed to protect your computer from malicious code running, period. Right? Now, what's interesting about this article is not only is Fin7 selling an AV neutralizer, right, a piece of code that will run and kill AV, and you go, well, that's weird. Like, isn't AV smart enough not to die when malicious code runs? You would think that would be kind of the first thing. Like, okay, guys, we're going to look for bad stuff, and somebody might say, hey, guys, what happens if bad stuff comes to us? You go, Yeah. So, and they normally do. To be able to run this AV neutralizer, and it costs about $4,000 if you're looking to do it. But to run this AV neutralizer, you actually have to be an administrator on the computer.
Okay.
So imagine this: you're on your computer, you're surfing the web, or you've clicked on a link in email you shouldn't have. You download a piece of code, application, whatever it may be. You double click on it and run it. If you're running as a normal user, it will not kill your AV.
Okay.
If you are running as an administrator, it will kill your AV and take over your computer.
Is that because it has administrator privilege?
Yeah. Yeah, it has administrative privileges. It's running as you, right? And you're an administrator. So you say, okay, well, this is a cautionary tale in two ways. One, don't use your computer day to day as an administrator. Right? Create an administrative account that you don't use.
Oh, come on. Especially developers. We're developers. Right? We have to do that.
Yeah, it works fine on my PC. Great.
Have you tried it as a developer? Patrick, have you done this as a developer?
Come on.
Yeah, he's going, okay.
No comment. No comment.
It's been a long time. I wasn't as good at doing good things.
But back when you did write code every day, I mean, I write code every day. If I had to authorize every disk access and every, that would drive me insane.
I'd like to think that I do this, but one of the things Dwayne will say is all the code that I've ever written was rewritten before it ended up in a final product.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we're paranoid. Almost all of our code is security code. And so I'll admit, I do that. I did that all the time, but I also only wrote proof of concept stuff.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's where the flaws come from. I mean, we have these, patch this vulnerability. If we could just get all the developers to really embrace this, we might only have a couple of patches a day instead of 80.
All right, Dwayne, fess up.
Yes.
Do you run in administrator mode?
As a developer.
I rest my case.
Do I run an administrator? No, wait, I do.
Your Honor, the defense rests.
I do. I run as an administrator. However, everything I do is on a virtual machine and snapped. So if something goes haywire, I can just roll the machine back. So I don't do any sort of mission critical stuff on my computer. I do it all in virtual machines. And then just roll the virtual machine back if I run into an issue. Because we're playing with live...
All right, so are the virtual machines running as administrator, or are you in your local Windows logon running as administrator? Where are you running?
In my local Windows login, I will run as an administrator. But then on these machines, I'm doing dev and testing and that sort of stuff. I'll run as a normal user.
I'll chime in here. We don't run as domain administrators.
No.
We're talking about a local box,
isolated local admin.
That with no map drives.
I don't. Most developers in 2024 don't know what domain administrator means because that's an artifact of the NT era, and they don't have a domain controller in their garage or whatever, unless you're Richard Campbell or Patrick Hines.
Yeah, backup domain controller, BDC. No, anybody? Woo.
I mean, if you're like me, you have a big ass computer that's really fast and a big screen that you do all your development on. You run in administrator mode.
Heck yeah.
So I guess what the takeaway is here: be like Dwayne.
Yeah.
Run virtual machines, and inside those virtual machines, you run in administrator mode.
And
hack people. Be like Dwayne. Hack people.
It's like the CIA recruiting poster.
Like Dwayne.
Travel to distant lands, meet exciting, unusual people, and hack them.
Yeah, except for that part. Don't be like Dwayne.
I'm going to have shirts made, honestly.
So
I think it's a great idea.
We're heading towards the longest show ever if we don't pick up the pace.
I know, this is.
Oh, yes.
So what is the call to action for the EDR killer hackers story?
Two things here. One, if you can... run in a way that you're not running it as an administrator. Number two, if you can't do that, just be careful that antivirus is not the end all be all. Lots of people say, I'll run through the seediest parts of the internet. I got AV. There are things out there that will kill antivirus and that can bypass antivirus. We do it all the time as a job. So you really just need to be careful.
I basically have Malwarebytes on a bootable Windows stick.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if I get any problems, that's what I do. I boot it up, scan it,
let it scan. Yeah,
good.
Not a bad idea.
Malwarebytes is still really good, right?
Yeah, it's decent. Yep. It depends on what you're looking for, but yes, Windows Defender is awesome. Mm-hmm. But using Malwarebytes occasionally to clean things up as well is a great idea.
Yeah. All right. So there's my peanut gallery advice. Put Malwarebytes on a bootable Windows stick and just keep it on your desk. Okay. Okay, let's talk about Life 360. Over 400,000 Life 360 user phone numbers leaked via unsecured API. I'm more interested in we were just talking about APIs that aren't secure. Most of them are. Well, duh. You're going to have a problem.
Yeah. And this company, what's funny is this company, for those of you that don't use Life 360, as a parent, I've had Life 360 for a long time.
What is it? I don't even know what it is.
Life 360. So it's an app you can install on your phone and all of your kids' phones.
Okay.
And at any point in time, I can open the app and I can see where they are. And you might say, well, whatever, Apple can do that with Find My Phone or something like that. But what it also does, especially with early and new drivers, is it gives you a driving report when they're done driving. So it detects speed. And it can say, hey, Sam's top speed was 85 miles an hour. It'll also detect phone usage while driving. That sort of stuff. But the other interesting thing, like I have a 20-year-old son who doesn't check like he could fall off the planet and never send us a text. But when he was like 17, it was the same thing. And so we could put a geofence around different places, like when he's going to school or whatever, and it'd say, hey, he's arrived at school because he's driving back and forth in the snow or whatever. And you're like, okay, I don't need to worry about where he is. He doesn't need to text me, at least now. So think like surveillance application for where people are. And that's where it's horrifying that there was an unsecured API. And simply put, imagine going to their website, and this is through the Android API. So they have access for Android phones, that when you put the app on it, you go to reset your password, if I remember correctly, or say I forgot my password. And if you put a phone number in there, or you put an email address, it would then give you back information. So I could say, oh, here's my email address. And in the request that came back to the app, it actually listed your phone number, but it didn't show in the app. So here again, some entrepreneurial hacker said, oh, this is neat. I can just proxy that request and I can put a whole list of email addresses in there and get phone numbers back. So there you have it. Yeah. API not secured, returning more data than the app needed, including personal information, which is sad.
All right. So is there a patch?
They fixed it. Yeah. Life360 said, you know what? You're right. We don't need to hand the phone number back every time somebody asks for, like, hey, I want to reset my Life360. And it says, well, here's your phone number. Go ahead. Right. They don't do that anymore. They fixed the API. But this is where like security reviews of your APIs make sense. Like, hey, what are you giving back to the app? Is it absolutely required? How are you authenticating the requests to the API? Most APIs like
reminds me of Austin Powers.
I can imagine people listening to this show and hearing all the things that they should do and saying, screw these guys. Every time I listen to the show, it adds like 12 hours to my week of stuff that I have to do.
This is why nobody wants to do security.
But hopefully it adds 12 months to your work because you get to stay employed because you didn't cause the world to melt.
That is
Yeah. I mean, security measures and spending time and money on security measures
it's a tax.
It's a it's a tax. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because if you do them and you spend money on them and time and you submit those hours and what did you do this week? Oh, I spent 12 hours after listening to security this week, battening down the hatches and nothing happens. You've wasted 12 hours.
Oh my gosh.
To the boss, right? But if you get hacked and you knew these things were vulnerabilities and you didn't do them,
then you end up testifying before Congress.
Yeah.
Hey, it's tough. It's a hard trade-off, which is why we have all these problems. But there is such a thing as bad PR, and it is a bad, it's when your system has been hacked and it's responsible for, destroying $1 trillion worth of wealth across your customer base.
Right.
I wish we could tell you, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about this stuff. And some of you don't, but I don't know which one's going to kill you.
By the way, remember last week we talked about the bad password requirements Hall of Shame?
Yeah.
Yes.
I kind of gave up that idea.
Why?
Because what's the point? What's the point?
Yeah.
There's so many of them. And if somebody says, hey, these guys fixed it, now we have to manage a list.
We don't have the time for that.
We don't have the time for that. And I don't want to just allow anyone to post a link.
No.
That's completely insecure, isn't it?
Yeah. Ooh.
So
let Troy Hunt do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he'll do it.
Yeah. But it was a noble idea, I think.
It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we don't have day jobs.
And here's what we could do. We could just say, hey, if you have an entry, just send it to us or send it via X Twitter or Mastodon, include us and say thanks security this week.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll shame the vendor into fixing it.
Exactly.
I like it.
Maybe we could just create another X and Mastodon account for Hall of Shame. That'll be worth it.
Done and done.
All right.
That'll happen.
Done and done.
Done and dusted.
All right, the next story, if we're done with that last story, are we?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. This is a securityweek.com story. Chinese hacking group APT41 infiltrates global shipping and tech sectors. Mandiant warns.
Yeah, and this is a quick one.
Well, there's that APT word again, right?
I know, right?
Advanced Persistent Threat.
And this is a quick one. So Mandiant, really big cybersecurity firm, brilliant at what they do. Mandiant says the bulk of compromised organizations are located in the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, Turkey, Taiwan, Thailand, and warn that APT41 has managed to infiltrate these orgs, maintained prolonged unauthorized access since at least 2023. So if you do manage any of these types of logistics, shipping style companies, you want to be careful. It's affected logistics, automotive, and shipping. And we saw, I think we talked about CDK about 2 weeks ago and them knocking offline 15,000 automotive dealers in the United States because of ransomware. They also say that they've been in these systems for a very long time. On average, a hacker is in your systems at least 9 months before you know they're there.
Wow.
Normally, it's 13 months. So a hacker could be in your computers for an entire
these are just
year
averages
before you notice. Yeah.
And these are just averages. This is not like there could be a hacker there permanently. As long as you have the system and you just never notice, that's possible too.
Yep, seen it.
This is not good.
So warning here is just be careful. Added logging and making sure that especially if you're in these sectors, this is the target now. It moved a little bit from hospitality now over to logistics and shipping and automotive.
Okay. Be careful out there. Wasn't that what they said on Hill Street Blues?
It was. Okay, be careful out there.
Hill Street Blues. You going to bring up Dragnet next?
Let's just be careful out there. I'm old. I'm sorry.
You're dating yourself because no one else will date you.
Oof.
Thank God for that. I can't imagine what it would be like to date in 2024 at 56 years old.
Ain't
all right, here's our... Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. Here's our clickbait story. U.S. disrupts AI-powered Russian bot farm on X. Woo-hoo. Now, here's the question. Was the Russian bot farm on X, or was the disruption on X?
Little column A, little column B?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Language.
So
my first question was, were there any people on X? Or is it all bots?
Hey, I'm on X. I do.
Are they talking about ecstasy? Were they all on ecstasy when they were
definitely on I'm on X right now?
Or was the bot farm on ecstasy?
Hey, just say no to drugs, kids. No, so and honestly, X is such a cesspool most of the time. It's hard to find any good information on there. But
oh God, yeah.
I do open it like once a week to find if there's any new burning security issue. So we hear a lot about misinformation, and we hear a lot about social media accounts locking down. We have to be a real person. You have to tie to a phone number, and these must be real accounts because X and Instagram and all of them are saying they're making it much harder to create accounts and that sort of stuff. And this just goes to show, no, there are technologies that are implemented today that can create tens of thousands of accounts a day. I can't tell you how many follow requests I get in X that are clearly the same exact template, like the same exact person from the same exact month. It's just insane.
I was just talking about the Azure API service, which does throttling and only allowing so many requests from a particular user at a time. I mean, how on earth do these bots get around it?
Well, they're just programmed to go slower.
Do they? Is every account from a different IP address?
They throttle it. There's you can get a different IP address for every request.
You can get a different IP address per web request if you want to. So if you were to go through AWS Lambdas and do like a fire proxy, every request you make is going to be a different IP.
I feel like we should be playing the music again.
It's Criminal Career Advice.
I think the music should just play in the background on this episode.
Every time Dwayne talks, that's your music bed.
Let's say you want to brute force Office.com or Okta or anything like that. I mean, you can't use the same IP, but if you route them all through Amazon, they'll give you a new IP every time. It's awesome.
Come on.
At least I'm just saying that's how I would do it. Theoretically.
If you were a
and you
hacking man.
you just gave the Russians a hint, a tip.
Like, well done.
It's like, oh, of course we should listen to Dwayne.
That's the reason I'm here. I'm insulting the Russians so much they won't listen to the show.
I know. It's terrible. I apologize, Lord. I apologize. I don't mean anything. I love Russian people.
I love Russian people.
I really do. I have
me
a
too.
lot of Russian friends. And when I say a lot, I mean 3.
I studied Russian in college. I speak a fair bit. I can read it still.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully people don't take
Not
us
fan of
wrong
the
on this show.
government.
Like, the Chinese people are fantastic. The people from Russia are fantastic. There's a lot of really good people out there. It's just when we start to see governments doing kind of shady things and then forcing organizations in their country to do those same things. And that's
we hold our own government accountable for stuff like that. Doesn't mean we hate America or Americans.
Nope.
My mother is a devout classical music and opera fan, and she's always lecturing us. And by us, I mean my brother, myself, all our kids, our spouses, about Russian soul. You have to understand Russian soul. She loves Rachmaninoff and all these.
That's cool.
You know. So yeah, there's a lot of great culture in Russia. It's amazing.
I mean, it doesn't help that the latest new reports are that they're actually now sending female prisoners to the front.
I know it's the current administration over there is kind of wacky.
There you go.
And that is putting it.
So
mildly.
there goes our visas.
All right, so
there goes our
so
visas.
People waited a long time to hear this story. Can we get to the story?
We can get to this story.
All
right. So, threat actors affiliated with RT, formerly Russian Today, a Russian government-backed media organization, have used artificial intelligence features of the Meliorator software, software to create fake online personas. We call sock puppets sometimes, but fake online personas used to disseminate disinformation to and about the U.S., Germany, Israel, Netherlands, Poland, Spain, and Ukraine. And this is the bot farm, according to the affidavit, was controlled by a Russian FSB officer and a Meliorator developer and members of the private intelligence organization. So, I think this is a great sort of feel-good story, I guess, where, we see a lot about disinformation and that sort of stuff, and it seems like it's really daunting and would be hard for us to fix. And we're starting to see government agencies really kind of try and tighten down on these things, so that the world population has more accurate news sources, and not just echo chambers from bots. So there you have it.
The scary part is that this is the tip of the iceberg, and we only got the tip, and the iceberg still remains. That's the concern. The problem is that most people aren't looking for valid information. They're looking for information that supports their current opinion.
Correct.
And they use it as proof to
absolutely.
say, see? And so that's the problem. This is a symptom of the problem as much as opposed to the cause.
Yeah. Problem.
Now that the bummer.
So what do we do about it? That's the question.
People have to people have to work to get better information, and we still have to keep trying to take them down.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's a great point. Is especially with elections coming up in the United States, as you see news articles, you see breaking news from whatever. If you see it on, say, X, or you see it on some other news outlet, verify it. Right? I love going to like the BBC. Or going to wherever, right? There's a bunch of different news outlets, not just in the United States, all across the world, that will report on those same, especially if they're global events. So just get some more input. Don't just take what you read from some crazy post in X.
And certainly don't take social media for news, right? And certainly go beyond the networks, because the networks they're interested in selling ads.
Well,
let's
one
face it.
phenomenon is things like Ground News, which is, I wish they were a sponsor. They're not. And they basically will let you see where your news coverage is missing stories and what stories are being covered in what way by the different, shall we say, sides of the spectrum.
I would also say that go to independently monetized sources for fact checking. There are these things out there, Pew Research comes to mind, factcheck.org comes to mind. They get their funding in diverse places and they have a reputation for being unbiased. And if you see something online, go check out Snopes, for example, longtime debunker of BS, right? So that's what I would do. I would find and to Patrick's point, BBC, they have no interest in either party in America, right?
Trying is half the battle.
Yeah, go to some other country's news outlets and see what they're saying. That's what I would do. Yeah,
good advice.
All right, so almost an hour today.
Did we do enough damage?
I think
we did.
Rotted everybody's brains.
Yeah.
Well, for all of our listener out there, thank you for sticking with us and listening to us, and tell everybody else, because come on, they're missing out on a good time, aren't they?
I'm having a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
If we're having a good time, you should be too. And don't take any wood nickels, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.